Hello, today we are looking at the subject of women's safety, which I'm sure is of concern to you wherever you may be on the planet. Sister Denise is here in the studio with me, and she and I have been going through a number of topics in the series which we are of the opinion are relevant to women. Sister Denise, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Tell me, women's safety. This has become an issue in practically every single country in the world, hasn't it?
Yes, it's a very big deal because women are, there are predators who just prey on women, and it's everywhere. Women are very vulnerable, and I think that the patriarchal society maybe initially was very protective of women, but it's become less and less so, and women are more and more likely to be preyed upon within the home, even from family members, in schools, in churches, synagogues, temples, in the roads, in the streets, in their cars. So I think it needs to be a number one priority of the media, governance, and so on, to make sure that women are afforded a suitable protection.
A woman living in today's world takes the necessary precautions to look after herself and protect herself, and by that I mean a sensible woman. From a spiritual perspective, what does women's safety entail, and how do you protect yourself on a level that's got nothing to do with the external?
Well, let's start with the fact that in many families, in most parts of the world, a girl child is considered bad luck and a failing on the part of the mother to give birth to a girl, so that the girl child doesn't have value. And that's where she is considered ripe for being misused, you see, right there. And so you cannot really protect women unless you change that attitude. You have to change the attitude that a girl child has exactly the same value as a boy child. A girl child is different, but not less. And until and unless that attitude is embedded in the society, you can't do anything. Because the society says the girl is not having value, therefore we can do whatever we want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have any value.
How does a woman who's brought up in that toxic environment change her attitude towards herself so that she has a sense of self-worth that's got nothing to do with the way she was treated?
Well, it's not that she was individually treated that way. The whole society treats her that way. So the only way that she's going to be able to get a different idea is if the whole society goes through a process of, apologizing. And that means the religions, the schools, because these things are embedded in the religions. You see, and the religions are the foundation of this idea. So it's a re-education, it's a rewriting of all the religions. How are you going to do that? That's practically impossible. So that means a girl, a woman, if she's very lucky, it should be normal, but in fact it's lucky. If she's lucky, then she's raised in a society where she is considered equal to the boys, where she's considered valuable, where her mother and father love her for what she is, where she's given all the rights to the education that is commensurate with her level of intellect and her wishes. and that this is carried all the way through. This will give her self-respect, you see, because if you take a person's self-respect away by undervaluing and by abusing a person, then you take away their ability to protect themselves. Then, on the other hand, the message is given to the males that you can do whatever you want with women and just have fun, you see. And so what I would say is we live in a very toxic society, and that our systems for protecting women and for educating ourselves are very lacking, and they're not functional. And I think also the punishments that are given out to women who displease the prevailing majority are draconian, and they're condoned, and you cannot actually have safety for women as long as you have social attitudes that are promoted by the establishment that says you can do whatever you want with women.
Okay, Sister Denise, we have women watching you right now who are at various stages in their adult lives, but who want to know how to protect themselves personally. What is your message to them? And we're not talking about burglar guards, and we're not talking about alarm systems. What is your message to them?
Well, I think on the physical level, all women should learn self-defense.
Yeah, okay, I agree.
I think that they should learn how to handle themselves in the face of verbal abuse. I think that they should have in place arrangements if there is abuse in the family, in the marriage, in the workplace. You see, very often if a woman complains about abuse, it's ridiculized or it is considered of no importance. And there are all kinds of messages that promote that attitude, you see. So even though it may be there in law that women are protected, but those laws are not applied. If a woman will go to a police station because she has been assaulted, usually they might assault her again, you see. So this sort of thing is absolutely unforgivable, but it's embedded in the society. So she has to look after herself. And I think other women have to look after women. But I think that it has to be challenged at every level, because there has to be a way to change the thinking about it. The newspapers have to change, the internet has to change, the whole issue of human trafficking, pornography, and so on, all of that has to be really addressed, because it enables women to be damaged.
What strikes me as you were speaking about women who has to go to the authorities for her personal protection is the bizarre situation where women return themselves to someone or a group of people who has harmed her before.
Yeah.
What is that about?
That's about, again, the social system. You see, the social system will put you back there. The social system put you there in the first place. And the social system has no other place for you, because if there is another place, the social system has to look at itself and find itself sadly wanting. And so the whole problem lies in the fact that we are in a patriarchal system which has set up a morality which is stacked against women. And so I think we have to move away from that whole system. And the only way to move away from that system is to bring a different system.
Okay, Sister Denise, like with all things, I'm looking at the practical aspects. Okay, so a woman finds herself in danger, and we have danger on so many levels, where she is not necessarily a victim, but aware that something may happen, and she and the other females in her midst may be in some danger. What does she stand to do as far as her internal processes are concerned?
Well, she has to really look after the externals, because that's the main one. I mean, take refugee camps. There are many, many refugee camps. Women are extraordinarily vulnerable in refugee camps. There is no protection for women, you see. And because the males are so predatory at this time in such gigantic numbers, that whole humanity has to really look at itself and say, look what I have turned into. It's like a monster which is eating itself, because humanity is males and females, and if half of humanity is consuming and destroying the other half, that's a suicidal way of being, so there's a serious human problem here.
Okay, so Sister Denise, a woman finding herself in this position, okay, of having her safety compromised, who feels vulnerable. How does she harness power to become safe?
Well, quite honestly, I think that she can't try to become safe, because there isn't safety for women. I think what she has to do is pull spiritual power into herself and create a sphere of energy around herself. And that can be done, but it's a big piece of work, and it requires utmost purity to do that.
What do you mean by purity?
By purity, I mean you have to become totally and completely asexual.
Okay. I had a feeling you'd drop a bomb like this in this conversation. What does that mean, Sister Denise? There's homosexual and there's heterosexual. I even heard of metrosexual. But what is asexual? Is that even a thing?
Yes, yes.
It's a thing.
Yes.
Right. Tell us about asexuality. We're not talking about plants. We're talking about people.
A woman who, like, as it were, turns into a light, so that it is impossible for a male to be sexually aroused on any level or to have any kind of sexual thought. I have an interesting story I will tell you. This was someone in Africa, a woman who was in her 40s, who got into a taxi to go somewhere, and the taxi driver took her somewhere else into a very, out of the way place with the intention of violating her. She picked up fairly quickly that this was what's going to happen. She established herself in very strong connection with God, and she established a kind of a atmosphere of purity. And the man went to the place he was intending to violate her, and then he turned around and took her to her destination that she had wanted him to take her to. And he said to her, "Look, I'm terribly sorry. I planned on violating you, but you're such a good person that I couldn't do it." That's a real story that I heard a couple of months ago from someone who I know relatively well. And to me, that's very interesting that, it is very possible for a woman to bring in that divine power, which definitely can help her, but she has to be very much into her purity, because purity is a power. And if you want to be safe, your purity is a power that will enable you to connect with the divine, and you become inviolate. But for that, a woman has to be willing to say, okay, I go for purity. These are the times when, if you want safety, that's the way to do it.
Okay, I didn't expect that answer. Okay, so Sister Denise, what you're saying is that women should ask in a louder voice, collectively, that the city they're living in, that the country they're living in, afford more protection to women? Are you saying they should not be such willing victims, or are you saying it's a quieter struggle?
No, what I'm saying is that the mentality of the people of the world in regard to women has to be looked at the level of the family, the community, the city, the country, whatever, because the whole thing across the board is stacked against women. And, the extreme position of a woman saying, I go for purity, is absolutely impactful in this. As I go for purity, end of story. And you bring in the divine, and it alters the mentality of people, because people will not change their mentality just by you telling them. A mentality can only be changed by a very powerful vibration surrounding them. And that can be done, imagine, it's unlikely to be a reality, right? But imagine all the women in the world said, okay, purity, we're asexual from now on. Have a nice day. That would change things.
I can't imagine that happening.
I can't imagine that happening either. But anyone who does that is able to protect herself. I mean, we've seen instances of it time and time and time again, because in the practice that I am involved in, celibacy is a big part of it, you see, because in celibacy you can call on divine power and you can use it.
Okay, Sister Denise, I'm sure there are a number of women watching you right now in open-mouthed shock. So let us move on, shall we?
Okay.
So...
No, but I mean, it's a real thing. If you take yourself back to I think it's the Trojan War, the women said no sex, and they stopped the war right there. Something around that time.
Yeah, those were very powerful women. So yes, Sister Denise, what is then the link between sexuality and women's safety? What is the...
Well, there is a link.
What is the link?
Well, the link is this, that my position of purity causes me to be inviolate. Take the example of Joan of Arc. Her position was always, I'm a virgin. And she got captured, and they couldn't do anything to her until they managed to force her into women's clothes. Then they could rape her, and then they could burn her. But, her position of purity made it possible for her to remain inviolate to a very large extent, against a huge force of men who were against her country in war. And in her country, but against her, because a woman leading an army to victory was just something they couldn't take. But without that woman's power and that woman's purity, and there's other examples, the Queen of Jhansi in India is another example of that there's something most magical about a woman's purity. If she decides, I go for purity, she gets access to big power.
Are you of the opinion that some women attract danger to themselves?
Well, I think that if you are not in your purity and you're not thinking about your purity, you're making yourself vulnerable.
Sister Denise, to be sexually active is normal. It's life. It's
It is.
reality. It's what makes the world go forward. Hello. Are you saying then all women who are sexually active are in danger of their personal safety being violated? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that if you're sexually active within the social system of marriage, the other men on the whole will respect it, on the whole, because you're protected by men through the institution of marriage. As soon as that breaks down, you're vulnerable. What happens to widows? You know, what happens to people who women who have to go out to work? You know, they're pointed at, they're considered, you know, bad people because they have to go to work. Something wrong with you, you didn't get a husband. You know, so you're prey.
What are your words for a woman who is concerned about her safety on every level, who's living in a war zone, as many women are?
Well, you see, rape is an instrument of war. She's unlikely not to be raped.
And so what can she do to...
She has to transcend. She has to rise above it. Because, you know, physically, the males who are in, you know, military mode and in that mentality, they will do that, you know, until eventually, I suppose, nothing's left, you see. And this is why, when you're in I would say these are extreme conditions we're talking about. When you're in extreme conditions, you take an extreme position. Hey, you know, in this position, I go for purity. Have a nice day. If you don't like it, too bad. There's not going to be many who will do that, but it is an instrument that will, you know, change the situation.
What are your parting words for our viewers on this subject?
I think that we have to think about dignity. And you have to think about your personal situation. You may be feeling safe in a safe situation. You may be feeling safe in a dangerous situation. You may be feeling unsafe in a dangerous situation. How you feel makes a big difference. And how you feel is to do with your intuition. And you know, I've had many situations in my life where I can go in this dress, which is a statement that I go for purity. I can go in danger areas, and even I can ask, why don't you do anything against me? And they will say, no, we can't. You're pure. You're not against us. You're, you know, you're special. You're different. Again and again and again, I've seen that the reaction of who you might encounter is like that. So I think in that sense, a woman can determine by that attitude of purity whether or not somebody will violate her.
Well, there you have it. Sister Denise has dropped a number of bombs in today's episode, and I invite you to watch this episode more than once for you to get the full message. It's a very personal issue, women's safety, and you need to ask yourself whether you feel 100% safe. If not, is there anything that you can do to improve your safety? There's some very practical things that were shared, like every woman on the planet should learn self-defense, which I agree with. And what struck me most is Sister Denise's emphasis and sharings on the subject of purity, which is not something that's discussed in today's world. So I do hope that you have listened to what Sister Denise has shared and are able to take it within you and apply it to your life. And I do wish you a life of safety. Take care, and thank you for sharing your time with us. Goodbye.